Dr. Emily Landau, Senior Research Fellow at INSS here in Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining Voice of America's Persian Service.
My pleasure.
I'd like to start by asking you about the Trump administration's recent announcement that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, is a terrorist entity. Now, previously, the U.S. had sanctioned some IRGC-affiliated entities as involved in terrorism.
Right.
How much of a difference is it to designate the entire IRGC as a terrorist group?
Well, there's two schools of thought here, and there are those that are saying that there really won't be any economic impact because of the reason that you just mentioned, and that it won't really matter. And the companies that should be designated have already been designated so that there won't really be any impact. However, it's also the case because the IRGC is involved in so much of Iran's economy. The fact that foreign companies won't know exactly which part of IRGC is involved in which company, at which level, in which activities, the thinking is that they will be wary of making deals with Iranian companies for fear that they might be crossing some American line and therefore up for sanctions. So the idea is that because actually the situation is a little bit cloudy and it's not clear, and now the IRGC as a whole has been designated, that this will make companies, as I said, much more wary, not willing to enter into these economic deals. Those that favor the designation and the pressure campaign have made the case that this will be a serious escalation of the economic pressure on the regime.
Well, what kind of impact economically do you think it will have on Iran?
Well, again, if companies are wary of coming in and making deals, it will have an impact. It could have a very serious impact. And because there are two schools of thought, I think we understand that nobody really has the answer right now. And once these go into effect, I think we will see whether those saying that there won't be too much impact or those saying there will be a significant impact are right.
Iran's leadership responded to this U.S. move by declaring the U.S. Central Command, which is part of the U.S. military, as a terrorist group. What kind of practical effect do you think such a declaration has?
I don't think it will have much effect at all.
And why is
that? The regime is threatening the United States on a regular basis. They issue threats all the time, different types of threats. They'll do this if the Americans do that. They've threatened the Europeans if they don't get the sanctions relief or the economic deals that they're looking for. They've also, they're not wary of threatening the Europeans as well, even though the Europeans right now are certainly more, let's say, on their side than the Americans are. So, these threats come all the time. I don't think they're going to be attacking American assets. I think that would be a real escalation and there would be consequences for that. So I don't think that's going to happen.
What other kinds of U.S. sanctions do you think might be in the pipeline here?
It's a good question. I don't know what more is in the pipeline. All I can say is that they're going to be going for whatever they think can put more pressure on this regime.
And how do you do that?
Well, again, look, the tools of the international community or international actors that would like to impact the behavior of other international actors are limited. And we know what they basically boil down to: economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions, threats of military force, and actual use of military force. There's not too much else out there. So I think they're going to be trying to put the pressure up as much as they can in the economic realm. Designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization, it's not only the economic implications of this. This is also a political message to Iran. So there's also that kind of diplomatic pressure. It's true right now the United States is, no one is following the Trump administration's lead on this, but it is a strong, a political, diplomatic message from the U.S. as well.
The ultimate U.S. goal seems to be here to pressure Iran into getting back into a negotiation to meet 12 major demands that the U.S. has laid out. How realistic do you think it is for the U.S. to expect to have a negotiating partner in the Iranian leadership based on the way Iran has negotiated in the past with the West?
Well, that's the question. But I think everyone has an interest in getting a better deal with Iran, or those that have an interest in getting a better deal with Iran, that this should be done through a negotiation and not by other means. The flaws in the JCPOA and the Iran nuclear deal are serious flaws. And they're very clear. The Trump administration has laid them out. Many scholars have laid them out. The deal is there. We can see it. We know it legitimizes their uranium enrichment program, which never should have happened. Ballistic missiles are not covered by the deal. There are sunset provisions. In other words, this deal has an expiration date. The inspection provisions are not stringent enough. So these are real issues that need to be dealt with. Trump administration tried to deal with them before they left the deal. There were talks with the Europeans. They weren't able to reach ultimate agreement on how to fix the deal. And therefore the Trump administration left. Now through the pressure campaign, they're hoping to get Iran back to the table. It's a very late stage. Iran is feeling a little bit empowered right now because the other P5+1 states seem to be supporting Iran, let's say, definitely more than they're supporting the Trump administration. So it's a gamble. But what I can say is, empirically speaking, if we look back to 2003 and the years since then, the only thing that has had an impact on Iranian decision-making related to the nuclear realm has been pressure. They have not responded to carrots. They have responded to pressure, whether fears of military attack. That was back in 2003, and that's when they put their weapons program underground. And again in 2013, after the biting sanctions of 2012, that's when they came back to the table in order to get the sanctions lifted. So pressure has worked with Iran. And I think the most realistic option for getting a better deal is through pressure.
Well, speaking of Iran's nuclear activities, Reuters reported earlier this month that diplomats told it UN nuclear agency inspectors, or IAEA inspectors, visited a previously secret suspected Iranian nuclear site in Tehran. What do we know about what the IAEA did at that site, and could that be a sign, the fact that such an inspection happened, of pressure working on Iran to open up such a site?
Well, here it goes more to how the IAEA has been operating vis-a-vis Iran, and it also has to do, of course, with the provisions in the JCPOA, in the Iran nuclear deal. It's not so much, I think, a result of the pressure campaign, but rather the fact that these nuclear archives that Israel took from the heart of Tehran over a year ago and turned over to the IAEA, they include a lot of information about facilities, about scientists, activities, equipment used in the nuclear weapons program with the aim of developing 5 nuclear weapons. So these are clear Iranian plans. The facility that the reports are that the IAEA visited is a facility that was named in the archives, and that Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, raised in his UN speech 6 months ago. He gave the coordinates, the Google coordinates. That was a big thing. No one in the United States paid attention because they were all involved in the Kavanaugh affair. But that's what happened at the UN. Now, the good news is that the IAEA has finally visited at least one facility named in the archives. The less good news is that it's taken 6 months, and the Iranians know that an inspection is coming, likely coming, and they've had a lot of time to clean up the facility. Moreover, there are many more facilities that need to be checked out. There are scientists that need to be interviewed. The Iranians have not allowed the IAEA to speak with the top Iranian scientist who was running the whole nuclear weapons program. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done. They took soil samples. We'll see what comes from that. There could be suspicious particles that are identified through the soil samples. But you know, the prospects are quite low, again, because 6 months have gone by. The Iranians have not just been sitting idly by and not doing anything at that facility.
What do you think is holding the IAEA back from more aggressively going after Iranian nuclear sites?
Well, what we've heard from Amano is that he feels that when he gets information from a third party, this could compromise his impartiality. So he feels that they need to check out all the material, through their means, that's legitimate. The question is how long it takes. He's quite upset that he's being sort of pressured to act more quickly on this information, again, so that it doesn't look like he's biased, the fact that it came from Israel. Now, again, these are original Iranian documents. We're not talking about intelligence that really needs to be checked. We're talking about the original Iranian documents. So one would hope that the IAEA could speed up the process.
You mentioned the documents that Israel says it took from Iran's nuclear archive. Iran has made this assertion that those are not actual Iranian government documents or files. What do you think of Iran's denials on that issue?
Well, all I can say is that Iran's foreign minister, till this minute, says that Iran never worked on a nuclear weapons program, and everyone knows that that's not the truth. So in terms of what Iran says about their nuclear program, I think we have to take that with a huge degree of skepticism. And I would trust Israel on this. It was an operation deep in the heart of Tehran. Israel took these documents. They are original Iranian documents, and they do show clearly and conclusively that Iran was working on a nuclear weapons program, which everyone knows in any case.
Well, I'd like to move on to the topic of the Israeli Knesset election, which just wrapped up recently. I'm wondering what kind of impact you think this election will have on Israel's approach toward Iran, and also how you think the election is being perceived by leaders in Iran.
I actually don't think that there will be much impact in terms of Israel's policy towards Iran. Right now, Israel is mainly concerned with what's happening in Syria, with Iran's entrenchment there. The fact that they would like to have a permanent Shiite militia in Syria that would be able to threaten Israel from the Syrian border in a similar manner that Hezbollah is threatening Israel from the Lebanese border. They're transferring, obviously, missiles and rockets and GPS technology for precision-guided missiles, and all of that explains Israel's operations in Syria over the past 2 years. Now, with Netanyahu continuing, I guess, as prime minister, that's clearly not going to change. I would have argued that even if Benny Gantz had become prime minister and formed the coalition, probably we wouldn't have seen a difference there, because the Iranian issue is not really controversial in Israel, and certainly not with regard to Syria. On the nuclear issue, I think you can find more diverse views, let's say, about the deal, how good it is, how bad it is, etc. But as far as activities in Syria, there's pretty much consensus, even with the more left-leaning parties. So I think we wouldn't have seen a change in any case.
Dr. Emily Landau, Senior Research Fellow at INSS, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.